This episode of Sovryn Tech is dedicated to Prince. May his music survive the artificial age.
Sobsu, the rated R radio star, ready for another episode of Sovryn Tech, and man, is this baby loaded. I mean, there's so much to cover in this. No interviews this time around. We've just got a ton of stories, ton of great content, and boy, actually, this is an episode where there's going to be a ton of science, but you know what? I got to start it off with some sad news. And I will talk more about this later during the climax, actually. But, just played a little Prince there, Party Man off of the Batman soundtrack from 1989. We lost one of the best this past Thursday, that being Prince at the age of 57. So, and also actually, who I won't talk much about, but someone who in many ways was just as perhaps influential and entertaining in my life, but we also lost Joni Laurie, that being China from the WWE, from wrestling. So I will get more into that later on, but I don't want to spend too much time on that because we've got a ton, like I said, just a ton to cover. Before we get into the full-on random access, though I guess really this is actually part of the random access, Google Play Music. Now, I mentioned last week at the beginning of the episode that Google Play Music was going to start, I think Monday, it was going to officially roll out its podcasting feature implementation. And they did it on Monday, as I had said. And you know what? It's pretty good for what it is. I talk all the time about software minimalism on Sovryn Tech, the idea that, just use what comes with the phone or, what comes with your device. And that in and of itself is kind of a security feature. And obviously every Android phone, unless you do a dark Android implementation, which if you don't know about dark Android, go to darkandroid.info. Every Android phone has Google Play Music built into it. Like it's the default music player. So if that default player can now also do podcasts, hey, great. And I made sure, as I said last week, that on launch day, Sex and Science Hour and also Sovryn Tech would be available on it, and they are. And they even have the nice little, E at the, next to the pod, it shows the artwork, for the podcast, has a nice little E for explicit. And, I don't know if I just listen to what are normally very, very mundane podcasts otherwise or what, but I haven't seen many other podcasts that even have that little letter E, next to them. I'm kind of, I don't know what's going on there. I'd like to think I listen to some pretty edgy stuff, but maybe I don't. So anyway, very few podcasts, and the search feature is pretty good. Like I said, the implementation they did is pretty slick. The only thing it's really missing, in my opinion, is it is missing the ability to speed up listening to the podcast, to 1.5x, 1.8x, or 2x. Most podcasts I listen to at 1.8x. But, for the convenience of it, being right there along with, say, cloud storage of one's music or with their Google Play Music All Access subscription, whatever, it's pretty handy. I'll admit to that. Now, it didn't show up. I didn't get the app until a couple days ago to where it updated the app on an Android device. But the web interface was there. Now, there's advantages and disadvantages to that. And this is important to talk about. I mean, this is news, and it might actually be in some ways very good news, especially for this show. The advantage, it's nice to have a web interface that has all your podcasts there, on your desktop. That's actually, or on your laptop. That's pretty cool. But the app itself on an Android device, and I would assume also on an iOS device, will allow you to download the podcast for offline playback. I was a little worried. I'm like, boy, if this whole podcast thing, because like I said, at first I only had the web update, and the web interface doesn't let you download the podcast. I wish it would, but it doesn't. And I was like, boy, if the Android app, or, if the mobile app doesn't allow you to download, the podcast, and it only lets you, listen to it through your data plan or through a Wi-Fi connection, I'm like, well, that's going to be a huge disadvantage. I mean, that's kind of the nice thing with like Pocket Casts or some other podcasting, podcatching apps that I use, is that you can, you don't need an internet connection whatsoever. You just download it, with an internet connection. Then you can be away from whatever and you can play it at any time and it doesn't use up your data plan. So I was a little worried the Google Play Music podcasting was going to use your data plan, but it really doesn't need to. It does allow for offline playback and listening. And it does allow for the other thing that the web interface was missing is it didn't have notifications. I was like, well, why can't it just give me, I mean, you already have, like, if you have a Google Plus account and all that stuff, if you're, knee deep in Google's ecosystem, at the top right of any Google page of any kind, be it YouTube, be it Gmail, whatever, there's the little notification, number, little bell up there that's mainly originally for Google Plus. Or, maybe a YouTube comment or something like that, which, depending on how you have it set up, are kind of one and the same. I was like, there's really no reason that notification little symbol can't tell you when a new episode of a podcast comes out. But it doesn't do that. However, again, with the mobile app has the features that we want. The mobile app will notify you when a new episode for a podcast comes out. Like it'll say, a new episode of Sovryn Tech is out there. And also the mobile app lets you know which ones you've listened to. Like there's a little dot next to each episode. So the mobile app's the real winner here. I wish the web interface had a lot more of those features. Of course, to some degree, I understand why it can't, or not why it can't, but why they don't want it to. This has to do with the fact, like, so say you're listening to music, not just podcasts on Google Play Music All Access. You can download entire albums, even if you don't own them and you're just paying for the All Access subscription, which, gives you access to 35 million songs now. You can download albums, but they lock down, obviously, where those albums get downloaded to. And the idea is similar with the podcasts. I don't know why that's set up that way. I mean, podcasts are largely free. Like that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Unless the idea is, with Google Play Music Podcasts, is that they will allow for exclusive content, which wouldn't surprise me at all, that you have to pay for, that might come with your all access subscription at some point. Like, there's some podcasts that have password protected content, or like you have Dan Savage's Savage Love Cast, whatever, that has a Magnum edition of the show where it has extra interviews and all of this. And you can only get that if you subscribe to the Magnum edition. Maybe Google Play Music will allow for, podcast subscriptions of some kind. Or there's, was Susan Bright's podcast, that's on Audible. You have to pay for each episode. Maybe it's all to allow for that. And it's so that you cannot just download those episodes, willy-nilly and then share them and upload them, even though that really doesn't stop the determined person who's trying to get, access to paid content. Believe me, there's nothing you can do to stop it. I guess it just stops the not so determined people from doing it, whatever. But this is largely a good thing for podcasts. Podcasting has a real problem. And that problem comes down to the fact of exposure. This is something I theorized because Amazon's getting really deep into the podcasting game, to where they're hiring hosts. They have this whole big plan out there, to make an entire platform around podcasting. And that's, despite the companies. Look, I don't love Amazon. I don't love Google. I sure as hell don't love Apple. Okay. But, a problem, it's good that these people are building, platforms for podcasting, because a problem with Apple is that, like, really, Apple's the only one that has any kind of platform. Like, the success of one's podcast relies largely upon exposure in iTunes. That's crazy. Because Apple doesn't really give a shit about podcasting. It's just by default. It happened to, obviously the name podcasting comes from the iPod. All of this just happened from them being in the right place at the right time. Yes, the iPod, I have said it many times on Sovryn Tech, is one of the truly innovative products that ever got released. Eons more innovative than the iPhone is. eons. I mean, like they're night and day as far as the level of innovation that they brought to the table. The iPod really is it is the device that created the mobile revolution. No question about it in my mind. Okay, but let's just face facts here that, and there's been great articles about this over the years, that Apple missed they missed the train. They dropped the ball on taking advantage of podcasting and creating a real platform that takes advantage of the medium. Now, maybe Amazon or Google will jump on board and create that platform that really harnesses the new medium, the new media that is podcasting. We're still, I know podcasting's been around for like 10 years, over 10 years. I mean, well over that, actually. It just, didn't have so much of a set form factor, perhaps, as it has over the past 10. But it is still in its very nascent stages. I mean, we're very, very early on in this medium. Even though everybody complains that everybody has a podcast, yeah, sure, and a lot of them suck. But that doesn't change the fact that we are in the early days of this, medium, and that it's really anybody's game to create the platform that's just going to take it to the next level. And Apple still doesn't seem to be doing anything to try and, bring it to the next level. I think Amazon is poised to be able to do something about that. And I could imagine, especially when you consider that, like, if Amazon went kind of the big ecosystem route, like, Alphabet/Google was a few years ago with Google Plus, before Vic Gundotra left, if they went with a big ecosystem play, because Amazon owns Twitch, Amazon has Amazon Prime. If they created like this cohesive whole where, all these different entertainment avenues were interconnected, like Twitch, podcasting, and Amazon Prime or Prime Video and all of that, they'd have a winner on their hands. But Google can do all of the same thing, which lends, to the old Sovryn Tech point that really the only tech companies that are actually competing with each other are Amazon and Google. Everybody else is just, way behind the times, in my opinion. That includes Apple. So anyway, even though Apple is starting to get in on that game, I think it's too little too late. Like they have that Dr. Dre show that's going to be an Apple TV exclusive or whatever. Yeah, like I say, they're missing out. They don't need to do that. They could just take podcasting seriously. And I think they would find themselves, in being taken much more seriously as an entertainment company. Otherwise, like I said, I think they're falling way, way behind. So, all right, enough of that. Do subscribe to Sovryn Tech and also the other show I'm on, of course, with the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, Sex and Science Hour. They are both on Google Play Music. The nice thing about that is you can just search for it. You don't need any RSS feeds for the show. Of course, if you want to find the RSS feeds for the show, for either of those shows, just go to zog.ninja. And if you look on the left-hand, the action bar there, or the sidebar, not the action bar. It doesn't do any action, really. But on the sidebar, you will find RSS feeds for anything you want there. So, all right, let's get into the rest of the random access here, because we've got a doozy of an opening story. In some ways, it's exciting, but not for the reasons that you may think. So here, let's do some more random access. Well, speaking of Amazon, they released this past week, of course, we're in April 2016, the Kindle Oasis. Now, I'm a huge fan of e-readers. I love these things, for a bunch of reasons. One of them being, though, is I like the fact that when I'm reading off of an e-reader, I don't feel like I'm looking at another screen. I actually more or less feel like I'm looking at paper. And as these e-readers get higher and higher DPIs, the resolution's greater on the lettering and everything, and it looks even less like a screen. And this is a good thing, because, I'm really conscious of this, especially lately, like the amount of time I spend. And not that this is due to the PC revolution or anything. This was true for TVs back in the day as well. But the amount of time that I spend looking at a screen bothers me. Be it my smartphone, whatever it happens to be, a laptop, whatever. I really don't like it. And I'm starting to feel like, and maybe this is all in my head. I mean, of course, one way or another, it's in my head, but, maybe it's not actual reality, but I feel like I'm just getting a headache, like on a daily basis, just the amount of time that I spend looking at a screen. Now, granted, I work, practically all day, and 99% of that work is on on a laptop or on a smartphone or whatever. So I'm just constantly looking at these screens, and it really bothers me. Like, I want to stop doing that. So e-readers are a great thing because I feel like I'm not looking at a screen anymore. Like that perception, even though, yes, it still is technically a digital screen of sorts. Well, not really, because it's, shifting magnetic bits. But anyway, I love e-readers. And so the Kindle Oasis came out, regardless of, yes, it has, an improved processor and all this stuff, pages swipe faster and all this shit. That's nice. And it has this great premium feel, and it's thinner than a pencil and blah, blah, blah. It's very light. The interesting thing with the Kindle Oasis is that now it's an expensive device, costs around $300, but it has a magnetic cover that attaches to it, like a sleep cover, which those are nice for what they are. But this cover, when it attaches, it gives the battery life on it ends up being like months. It's impressive. Now, granted, you got to be careful with this metric, okay? It's already been impressive that e-readers would have a advertised battery life of a month. Now, it's an advertised battery life of a month based upon you reading only like a half hour a day, right? So the reality of the Kindle Oasis's battery life is probably pretty similar, but maybe now, so if you read for a half hour a day, this will last you months and months and months and months. Okay, 3 months, whatever. Probably now you could have it on, maybe 24/7, and maybe it would actually last you a full-on month, for the first time. So that advertising would actually live up, kind of to the perception of what they're saying. And I think that's pretty cool. And it also has a better, a better standby mode that is less battery draining and all that. It has more even backlighting with the LEDs and all this. All of that's great stuff. I think e-readers are just awesome. Honestly, I wish most technology would take advantage of, e-paper, of e-readers, of e-ink screens. Not of e-readers, but of the e-ink screen. That's the main thing that I want them to take advantage of. I'd love to have a laptop that had an e-ink screen. I'd love to have a smartphone, and they've been developed in the past. They just never were a thing in America. I'd love to have a smartphone that had an e-ink screen that would last, the battery would last forever. I love the Pebble smartwatch that has the e-ink screen on it, and it lasts you a week. I don't need all these flashy colors and all this bullshit. Just give me the information, give me the data, and if it can be easier on my eyes and it doesn't give me a goddamn headache for staring at it all day, or for weeks and months on end, whatever. Awesome. I think that's a great thing. So e-readers, very cool. And of course, some people remember, I've done write-ups about this on the Dark Android blog, at darkandroid.info, where I talked about, an e-reader you could kind of pull off because the e-readers generally have web browsers built into them, and the Kindle Oasis is no different. They have a web browser built into them. And if you're, say you're a PGP encrypted email through Tutanota or something, through the service Tutanota, or you had your Bitcoin wallet through Rush Wallet, it was all web-based. You could have a Bitcoin wallet on there. Yeah, you wouldn't have the camera. That can be, that could potentially be an issue. But you could have, a web wallet. You could have encrypted emails and all of this built right into your e-reader. And, nobody would suspect. If you're crossing borders or, traveling, whatever, nobody's going to suspect that your e-reader, could be the key to your, your encrypted emails or to your Bitcoin wallet or things like this. There's a lot of potential there just based around the perceptions of the device, that it's a very benign device. And most people don't consider it valuable either. So, that's something to consider. But granted, now there's a little bit of a problem with that. I'm not 100% certain that this is true for the web browser built into Kindle devices. But the web browser, what do they call it? Silk, Amazon Silk. That's the web browser for Fire tablets. Okay, two very different things. For Fire tablets, admittedly says that pretty much everything you do on that web browser gets recorded by Amazon, just straight up. When, you have to, say, I agree on the EULA, terms of service and all that. But I don't know that that's necessarily true with the Kindle Oasis or with Kindle devices themselves and their far more basic web browser, because they're certainly not running Silk, the Amazon Silk browser on there. But that's something to keep in mind. That Amazon could be recording everything you type into a web browser on that. So fair warning, but that doesn't stop you from doing it with other e-readers like perhaps Kobo and some others. But I've never gotten a clear answer on all that. So anyway, Kindle Oasis, I think that's pretty interesting. We've got so much. Just a couple stories. I mentioned the Dark Android blog. I want to bring up a couple stories that I covered on that. There is the Uber user data scandal, and this is pretty interesting. So, and you can read my full write-up. Please go to darkandroid.info, click on the Dark Android blog, and you can check it out. Actually, the article got quite a bit of, it made the rounds pretty good, which I'm always happy about that, especially with important stuff like this. Uber, they released a transparency report a couple weeks ago here in April of 2016, and they admitted that 12 million users, users, not just users, but drivers, customers, users encapsulates everybody, that they handed over data completely willingly to any government agency, not just, NSA or something like that, but any local law enforcement, whoever. They just, gladly, and to politicians, whatever, they just handed over all of that user data, no problem. All they had to do is ask. No need for, any FISA court nonsense. No need for warrants or whatever. Nope, just ask Uber. And, you're from the government? Here, please. No, we're not going to give you a hard time. We're not Apple. We're not Microsoft. Here, no, just take the data. That's fine. I mean, I made the point in my article, like, if that doesn't show that Uber is effectively an arm of the state, if they're willing to, they have no concern whatsoever for your data. Forget about the argument about privacy and all of that. Is it okay for, how would you feel, if you went to McDonald's every day and you ordered stuff and you could, they would just give that information up, based upon you. What if they just handed over your credit card information? To some degree, your transportation information, where you're coming from, where you're going, all this stuff is just as potentially usable by an attacker as your credit card data is. Would you mind if McDonald's or whoever else just handed over that kind of info? No. You want some degree of guarantee, that what you're doing, what you're using doesn't just get passed on to somebody else. But it does. Uber, arm of the state, just like so many of these other tech companies, in my opinion. I think it's absolute fact. Now, my real problem here is yes, I have a problem that Uber just hands over my data. And believe me, there's right ways they could go about this. They could do some kind of zero knowledge encryption. I mentioned all this in the article, to where they wouldn't be able to hand over any data. When a government does come a-knocking, what is a company to do? Well, they should do what LeVar Levinson did with LavaBit when they came over and said, okay, we want access to all these emails, for all these people that use this stuff. And in fact, now we know they were actually going after Edward Snowden because he used LavaBit. LeVar Levinson shut the company down. That's what you do. Instead of handing over consumer data, instead of handing over your customers to bad actors like governments, all of them, you shut your company down straight up. That's the end of it. And because believe me, if it shuts down, there will be a stink made by your customers because perhaps they love your service, and things will turn around very quickly. Governments walk a very fine line in that they know that, they only operate via the consent of the governed. And really, that's a fact. If people just suddenly said, we don't believe that, that the government's doing right anymore, things would change. So there's a way Uber could have gone about this that's better. But here's my real problem with all this. And this is a problem with a lot of things. This speaks very, very much to a lot of my points on sovereign tech, because I get pretty heated up and I get angry about things and all of that. Now, a lot of times I'm not saying, yes, I think this is unethical for, the real lack of ethics comes from the government, wanting access to this data in the first place. But my real problem here is the narrative around Uber. The narrative that Uber is somehow this free market, jewel. That somehow Uber is this anti-government company because they ignored all the rules. Well, obviously they don't ignore all of them. Or that attitude in and of itself has gone the way of the dodo, that somehow they are anti-legislation, dumbass government, taxi monopolies and all of this. Not that governments run the taxi businesses, but, certainly legislation was favoring these taxi monopolies. No doubt Uber did break up the taxi monopolies in a lot of cities, and I think that that's great. Okay. But, we don't, just because they did that doesn't mean we have to say, oh, Uber, you wonderful company. Oh, you are capitalism done right. No, they're not. No, they're not. I mean, if capitalism done right isn't caring about the consumer and not handing over, data or showing it up on a big screen at a party, like with that whole Godview scandal and all that stuff, sorry, that's not a company being done right. So the real problem with a lot of these companies, sometimes they really, Apple, Google, Microsoft, yeah, they're companies. They can call their own shots. They can do what they want within their companies, and maybe necessarily it's not unethical. But my real problem with so many of this stuff is the narrative that gets told about these companies. Like the narrative that somehow Uber is heroic. No, they're not. Here's the proof. They'll hand it, they just bend over, grab the ankles and say, you want data on 12 million users? No, don't worry about a warrant. Here, just take it. Just take it. You can have all the data you want. We'll collect everything for you. We'll give you a nice little central hub here and you can have it. Boy, it drives me insane. I've been knocking Uber forever on this show, so whatever. Not that this is anything new, but this was just so egregious, I think, and so blatant. All right, let's move on to other things. We'll cut this short here. All right, last bit of the random access. Apple. Apple. If you are a Windows user, and I know that quite a few of my listeners are, and whatever, that's fine. You will want to go uninstall QuickTime right now. Come to find out, and Apple didn't tell anybody about this, and this is going to get back to the whole narrative point. Apple stopped updating QuickTime for Windows. They just stopped a couple versions ago, and there are some major security flaws in that version of QuickTime that you have, and that they're never going to update. And they said, they said we're not going to update it anymore. And whatever, you think, well, QuickTime's not a big deal. Not necessarily true, because things like Adobe Premiere and some other, really premium software still use QuickTime on in their back end. Okay, so that's a problem. So some people, especially if you use some of that software, at least at this moment in time, you cannot not use QuickTime. You have to have it. Also, I'm curious how, if you buy movies on iTunes and you have a Windows machine, I've never done this, so I don't know. I think that relies on QuickTime. So if you have a huge iTunes library of movies that you buy, you've got a giant security hole, with exploits known in it on your Windows machine right now. And I know some Apple fan is going to say, well, you're using Windows in the first place. That's a huge security hole. Yeah, whatever. Okay, here's the problem, is that it took a whole lot of teeth pulling to even get Apple to admit that they stopped updating QuickTime for Windows and to admit that those security flaws exist within the software. And they're not going to do anything about it. Now, here's the funny thing, is that we talk about, Apple versus the FBI, that whole case and all this stuff, or how Tim Cook will go on Charlie Rose and say, we care about privacy and security and all this. Security is our number one priority, blah, blah, blah. Apparently not. This is that whole narrative. This is the problem. Am I going to tell Apple that they need to update QuickTime? No, they don't have to do anything. They can stop all the backwards compatibility stuff. Fine, whatever. You don't have to. You can cancel QuickTime right now, and there's nothing technically wrong with that. But here's the rub. Don't go telling people you give a shit about security and then just leave the most popular Windows is still heavily used, okay? And then, leave everybody that uses a Windows machine high and dry with very serious security exploits in your software. You're full of crap. This is the problem. This is what I get heated up over. This is what, I don't post on Facebook anymore, really. Okay. But I would have people get in touch with me or, they would respond to what I'm saying. It's like, well, isn't it okay for them to do that? They're a business. They can do this sort of thing. They don't, they don't have any responsibility to the individual to have to. No, of course you're right. But then don't bullshit me. Don't fucking lie. And say you care about security and when you're going to leave this shit. When you, and you're not, honestly, they could have at least told people. Say, hey, yeah, we're not going to support QuickTime anymore. Not the QuickTime's app, most people I don't even think use that software, but whatever. It's not even that great a software. But they could have at least admitted it. And then people could have taken some kind of action. Did they even let some of the partners that use QuickTime as the back end know? I don't know. I would hope, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they just stopped and say, yeah, fuck, whatever, fuck those people. That's crazy. And there's a lot of people that use Windows PCs and they have iPhones, right? So, there's still, it's not like people that use Windows aren't part of Apple's customer base whatsoever. That's ridiculous. And and to some degree, how unthankful, do you have to be? Let's be clear here that in the late 90s, if Apple didn't get injected with Microsoft funds, remember that whole Big Brother moment where Bill Gates was, I forget, it was at a WWDC or some conference for Apple where Steve Jobs was making his triumphant return back in the late 90s. And there was Steve Jobs, looking down upon, there was Bill Gates looking down upon Steve Jobs on high. And he pretty much, they injected the funds. They bought in, they put the faith into Apple that allowed Apple to really to become the company it is today. Really? What a bunch of unthankful bastards. But yeah, it's always the rhetoric, man. It's always the narrative around this stuff. Tim Cook, you care about security, you're full of shit, and I've got the proof. There it is. So anyway, we can move on from that. But just real quick, look, I think people take what I'm saying, Uber, Apple, I'm not saying using or buying from them, using their service or buying their products or whatever. I'm not saying you're doing some kind of grand evil by doing so, okay? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, let's be real, okay? Let's not hold these companies on high like somehow, there's some paragons of virtue when they're not. When they're full of shit in half of what they say, or they're absolutely complicit in working with government. Let's just be clear and let's be open about that. I'm not saying you're doing something wrong. I'm probably going to end up having to use an Uber at some point in the near future. Who knows? Okay? Whatever. I'm just saying, know the truth around this stuff. It's just like with Facebook. People say, well, isn't it amazing what Google or Facebook offers for you? Totally, all the services they offer totally for free. It's not for free. It comes at the cost of your personal data. It comes at the cost of your privacy, perhaps. There is a value there that they are getting from you. Nobody gives something away or practically nobody, especially companies out of Silicon Valley and stuff like this. They don't just give you shit for free. They are getting something out of it. Yes, it doesn't cost you money, perhaps, though it could. In the future somehow, maybe at a loss of the ability to get a job because, oh shit, look at that shot of you in that drunken, stupor or whatever. Okay. But let's just be clear. Let's be super, super clear in these narratives and how we talk about these companies and let people know the reality of these companies. That's all I'm saying. There it is. Let's move on to the main story. We've got a doozy here.
CBS reports UFO. Friend, foe, or fantasy? Reported by CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. Reports of flying saucers are nothing new. From the beginning of recorded time, men have been seeing unexplainable things in the sky. And there's no reason to doubt they saw something. The question is, was what they saw really there? And what was it they really saw?
Walter Cronkite 50 years ago in 1966 with a CBS News special on UFOs. Many people may want to believe, but there's never been any solid evidence of flying saucers or alien visitations. So instead of waiting to be found, why don't we go looking for them in interstellar space? That is the plan announced this week by famed astrophysicist Stephen Hawking, Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg, and a Russian billionaire, Yuri Milner. Jeffrey Kluger, Time Magazine's editor-at-large, is here to tell us more. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's so easy to be dismissive of this whole idea until you read those names. And then you think, these guys must have a plan. What is their plan?
Their plan is, instead of sending large spacecraft that have to carry all their fuel along, if you miniaturize your spacecraft to about 1 gram, which means that 5 of them could fit in a teaspoon, build several thousand of these, send them out and use them, propel them with lasers, basically even as small as they are. You put a 1 square yard mylar sail on them, hit it with a powerful laser, and you can achieve 1/4 of the speed of light to get out to these stars.
How long is it going to take to get out to these stars?
Well, the closest star system is 4.3 light years away, and 1 light year is 6 trillion miles. So it would take, if using traditional chemical spacecraft, it would take 30,000 years. In this case, it would take 20 years to get out to Alpha Centauri.
So once you get a laser and you shoot it out there, it's finally there in the system that we think life could exist on.
Right.
What are they actually, what are they measuring that we could use to know?
They measure a few things. First of all, you simply send back imagery, and you can tell if a world is the right color or has the right look to support life. But you also look for the spectroscope. You look at the fingerprint of biology in an atmosphere. So you look for methane. You look for anything that suggests the chemistry of chlorophyll. You look for oxygen. And all of these things suggest that even if life isn't there, it's a hospitable place for life.
What's interesting, too, is that this is a private project. The initial investment is $100 million, but ultimately it's going to cost a lot more than that.
It's going to cost a great deal more than that. Yeah, the $100 million is seed money, which tells you something about this. When you've got $1/10 of $1 billion, and that's just your starting money, the estimated total cost would be about $20 billion. So it would take about 20 years to figure out how to do this and to launch the probe. So it's going to be a while, but once you get it done, they're on their way.
But is this the future, to have private citizens say, let's do this on our own, let's not rely on the government?
I think so, and the reason is it takes a handful of people with very deep pockets and a very resolute will to do this, to get it done. When you're working with a government, when you're working with any kind of bureaucracy, you have so many constituencies to appeal to, so many constituencies whose approval you need. When it's done privately, you just put up the money and launch.
What's the biggest challenge for this project, Jeffrey?
Well, the biggest challenge for this project is time. I mean, we'd like to think that we're going to see these things soon, but they're going to take 20 years to build, 20 years to fly out there, even at 1/4 of the speed of light, and then it'll take about 5 years for the data to get back. So patience is a part of it, and also there are some technical obstacles to overcome. When they're flying through space at 1/4 of light speed, even a dust grain that hits the sand, hits the screen, could obliterate the spacecraft.
When you look at the board of directors, it was initially Hawking, and then it was Milner, and then Zuckerberg came on last. And he's kind of the wild card to so many people.
Exactly.
What do you think he's going to bring to this project?
I think Zuckerberg brings 2 things. He brings very deep pockets, one of the deepest sets of pockets in the world, and he also brings the infrastructure, the intellectual infrastructure that is Facebook. You have a collection of some of the smartest, most innovative people in the world working at Facebook. You put these folks together on this kind of innovative idea, and as long as they bring the energy they brought to social media to the idea of getting to Alpha Centauri,
it's like a Silicon Valley approach to it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly
a lot
what
of
it is.
private willpower here.
Exactly.
Jeffrey Kluger, thanks very much.
So what we're going to talk about is Breakthrough Starshot. That was from CBS, that clip, which I think did actually a great job of quickly describing what exactly Breakthrough Starshot is. And, you know, I love the fact, so this is a program, you know, to just, you know, start really exploring, of course, the plan for them is the galaxy, not just our solar system, but to do so with incredibly small spacecraft. I mean, like, really small. Like, I did a write-up about this on the Zog blog at zog.ninja when it was first announced, because I said I wouldn't be able to get to it on Sovryn Tech for at least a couple weeks. And I kind of described it as like, this is like sending a bunch of Raspberry Pis into space, but it's infinitely smaller than that, you know, sending off these ships. And it's all very viable. But anyway, the interesting thing here for me, first off, with CBS is how did they allow a guy to get on there to say, you know, an expert to say, yeah, see, the reason private individuals got to do this is because when you're dealing with government, it just gets in the fucking way. Like, I mean, they straight up admitted that. That government, it's going to take too much time. It's going to hold everything back. You're not going to get enough money. You know, I mean, you just got a case study in government inefficiency writ large on one of the, you know, most important developments, I think, for humanity, because as I've said many times, I think humanity is meant to be a multi-planet species. I mean, right there on CBS. So anyway, an interesting clip. Now, of course, this is, you know, Breakthrough Starshot, which the idea is the main goal that they laid out, from Yuri Milner, Stephen Hawking, and of course, Mark Zuckerberg. We'll talk about that, you know, the importance of him being on board as well. You know, their main plan that they're talking about is trying to get to Alpha Centauri, which is more or less the closest star system to the star system, you know, to the solar system we live within. And with this, they could get there in 20 years. Now, all of the, you know, the laser propulsion, a lot of this different stuff, of course, it's a lot easier to propel something so goddamn small. Okay, but a lot of the technologies laid out are real. They exist, or or at least they're so far ahead in their theoretical stages, they just need to get built. Okay, and if you go to the zog.ninja and you type in Breakthrough Starshot, you'll find, you know, there's a video there that shows like this array of, you know, of not of satellites, but of projectors, you know, to send a laser beam and all that. And that lends itself to kind of one of the first problems is that these aren't ships that are going to be able to turn. You know, they like they are on a path. The laser, you know, the laser is propelling them, and they have to go effectively where the laser pushes them. It's a very straight line. This is a laser railroad through the stars. Okay, that's the idea here. But one of the technologies that they really need to develop, they're still working on, you know, shrinking things down to where you could have a spacecraft that small that you know, has a bunch of sensors on it and all that stuff. But at least all it is really just scaling it down. And that's an easy problem to do from Earth. I'm excited about this, bottom line. Even though Zuckerberg's involved, I'll talk more about that. I am excited about this prospect, about sending these probes, these nano probes, effectively, you know, into space for a few different reasons. Okay, but I mean, it's a lot easier to make this happen when when the problem is trying to shrink something down as to where the reason that humans aren't already, you know, traveling the stars, or at least, you know, inhabiting our own solar system. Of course, I don't think humans themselves are ever going to really, you know, go much beyond the solar system. You know, the problem you have is that everything has to be huge, and it has to be so huge. How the fuck do you get it off of planet Earth? It's so cost prohibitive to get something, you know, that big, you know, a spaceship that big up from Earth into space. This doesn't have that problem. It's the opposite direction that they're going, and it's the right direction. It's a really cool idea. One of the major technologies that they have a problem with, though, is communications. How do you transmit that? Say you actually get one of these nanoprobes to Alpha Centauri. How do you get that data back in a timely fashion? You know, because radio would take forever. And that's one of the challenges that they have to figure out. But I think that's something that could get figured out. If anything, you know, maybe there's a way that I don't know, that you could use that same laser technology that propelled it in the first place, you know, to send something back. I mean, there's smart guys working on it. There's no doubt about that. Now, what I think as far as Zuckerberg being involved, I could imagine that he is thinking of expanding, Facebook, honestly. I know that sounds crazy. And I cracked a joke in my article. I said, it was like, well, it's Silicon Valley style here, like they said in the CBS report. It's Silicon Valley. You've got it. What is the goal of Silicon Valley? You just got to have growth. We just need more users. You don't have to actually make any money. Okay, don't worry. There's a bunch of idiots out there that'll just keep tossing you cash. You don't actually have to make money. All right, you don't have to have cash flow or anything. You just have to, or you don't have to have earnings. You just have to keep having more people add on. So now Zuckerberg is like, okay, so if we send out a bunch of nanoprobes, we can connect all of the aliens to Facebook, and that's just endless growth. And of course, I'm joking. But I do think that in many ways it does have to do with the ability of getting, effectively launching nano routers, perhaps. This is much like there was a Project Titan. I think that's Facebook's drone project to launch drones that transmit internet around the globe. Well, I think honestly, Zuckerberg's interest here may come from a similar idea, but in this case with these, with these nanoprobes, these nanocrafts, this nanocraft that they plan on launching with Breakthrough Starshot. So and that's Zuckerberg's involvement. I don't know that it goes much beyond that. Perhaps certainly I don't trust anything Zuckerberg does, but there you go. But now what I think is really going to happen here, I have 2 points. First off, I don't think that this is going to lead to. They talked about the timetable, that really it's going to be 20, 25, 30 years before, we really see anything out of this, if at all. I don't think this is going to lead to humans going to Alpha Centauri. Okay. And that's their narrative. That's what they're saying, is that's the goal. Or it's to find life, which that's all, just happy-go-lucky stuff. I mean, I think there's more. The real reason behind this I'll get into, and I still think it's an exciting one, even though it's not what they're admitting to people. I don't think humans are going to go there. First off, you have this problem. This is all laser propulsion. Okay. And propelling people to Alpha Centauri is going to take, still 20 years. Like, to have somebody that can actually handle what's going on with the, in that case, it wouldn't be a nanocraft, but the starcraft that the starship that you're sending out there. Those are going to be people that are advanced to some degree in years, I would think would be a requirement. And so it's not a good bet, in my opinion, that the people that would say they did it right now, if it took them 20 years and they knew it would take them 20 years, I don't think that those people would live to see Alpha Centauri. They would probably try and pull off like a generational ship. And especially, what if Alpha Centauri isn't habitable? What if there's nothing there habitable, for humanity? So they're going to have to go on to something else. Now, maybe they'll want to go to another star system where, there's one of these planets that supposedly they find that are within a Goldilocks zone and are very Earth-like. Okay, but then we're probably definitely going to run into, because 20 years is one thing. Even that, I think, would require a generational ship. A generational ship is where, you have families on board the vessel, and it's actually the children of the ship that end up completing the mission, or that end up seeding and colonizing, another, an alien world, another planet. Okay. Anywhere other than Alpha Centauri, and you're definitely going to have a generational ship of some kind. But there's an inherent problem with generational ships that no science fiction author, to my knowledge, has really touched on, and that's really where generational ships have been. They've been in the realm of science fiction. Now, also, there's cryonics. That's an interesting concept to look into, to where, everybody within the ship is frozen until they get, they're frozen for 20 years until they get to, to Alpha Centauri or wherever they plan on going. That's a possibility, I grant you. That is a possibility, but I think you're running into so many risks with that. Like, cryonics is such a new field. We're a good distance away from cryonics being viable in a mobile platform, which any spacecraft would be. to where I think that's really something that they would get into. I mean, and also you have the risk. I mean, what if something happens to the laser guidance system? I mean, yeah, you have inertia, but they're stuck. I mean, these vessels, the initial ones they're talking about, largely don't have their own fuel. That's how they're going to get off of Earth in the first place. Okay, and I'm comparing the nanocraft to human filled spaceships in this case. The spaceships are a very different story. I mean, and you're going to want it to be a light payload. That's kind of how this whole laser propulsion works, is that the lighter, the better, the faster it can go, blah, blah, blah. I mean, this is, I don't think a rational person would get on something that doesn't have its own thrusters to where they could guide themselves. I really don't. I mean, yeah, there's very adventurous people that take a lot of risks, but I don't know if this would fit within most people's, risk tolerance or threshold. But I want to get into, there is an inherent problem with generational ships, because I think that's what most people would say, well, we'll just do that. And here's the problem. We talk about ethics. I think it is absolutely unethical to have children and force them. So let's say you're on this laser-propelled, the future of Breakthrough Starshot is bright. We're taking this generational ship to the stars. We're going to go to Alpha Centauri or Sirius B or whatever. We're going to go this grand distance, and we will have children, and those children will finish the mission for us. And yay, humanity and all this. I think it is absolutely unethical to have children under the auspices, under the purpose of their purpose in life is to finish some kind of mission that they didn't choose to even be on. No, I don't know the science fiction author that's ever brought that up. I don't know the scientist that has ever brought that up, which shows how fucked up our society is. I have the same problem with, that concept. I bring this up often. The concept of liberty babies. Well, I'm going to peaceful parent my kids, and they're going to end the state because they're a peaceful parent. No. Don't you tell your kid what to do. Don't you tell your kid what they have to be, what their purpose in life is. Fuck you for that. Fuck you. And fuck anybody that thinks it's okay to have kids to help finish a mission. Come on. Are you serious? That's horrendous. That's disgusting. Parenting doesn't get much worse than having children for some kind of specified. I mean, those kids did not choose to do that. And some people would want to take perhaps that concept to extremes. Well, they didn't choose to be born in America. Well, do that exploration on your own, folks. But I'm just saying that it sure as hell isn't right to have children based upon them, finishing some bullshit mission for some bullshit people like Mark Zuckerberg or whoever else. I think that's crap. Now, on the bright side, like I said, overall, I do like Breakthrough Starshot. I think this is a great idea, because what I think it's going to lead to is not the exploration of the galaxy, but it will lead to the exploration of the solar system itself. And there's already a lot of scientists that are excited about just what they can do within our own solar system. And that's the right perspective, I think, to have, in my opinion. I think this will lead to effectively the railway system of the solar system. With all of these different laser, I mean, granted, yes, we're not going to have ships that are going to, other than maybe very simple thrusters, are not going to be propelling themselves around. We're not going to be on the Starship Enterprise, unfortunately, to where we can say warp speed and like Captain Kirk would say, that away, or second star to the right, straight on until morning. We're not going to be doing that, but we will be able to get from, based upon these laser arrays. It almost sounds hilarious to say I want to do a whole Dr. Evil with fire the laser. But with these laser arrays, I do think we'll be able to travel pretty good throughout the solar system and take excellent advantage going back and forth of a lot of the minerals and a lot of the resources that the solar system itself provides. We'll be able to colonize other moons and perhaps planets, within our own solar system. And just this incredible, what the railroad system did in the 19th century, okay, for commerce, for markets. I think that this laser propulsion system being spearheaded by Breakthrough Starshot will be able to do for future generations of humanity and for the entire solar system, and that is really exciting. That's fucking awesome. And that's the direction I think that this will ultimately go. Is that, effectively, this is going to be a test bed for a lot of various other technologies, and they are technologies that are very practical. Like I said, other than the communications thing, how do we get data back from these probes as quickly as possible? None of this is science fiction. All of this is very hardened science. It's very legit, unless you're a flat earther, which, whatever. You're not part of the conversation. All this science is very, very real. It's all very, very possible. It's very exciting. And I think it will really, really bring us to the stars in a great way, a very freeing way. I mean, the potential to just go inhabit some asteroid in the prime asteroid belt and, live in perhaps an intentional community on one of those. Oh, there's some exciting possibilities with this. So good on you, Breakthrough Starshot, overall. Hey, we talk about decentralization. We talk about perhaps some cold storage, local storage, all this. How about you take those ideas and bring them to your wealth? Bring them to your money, okay, your commodities. And I want you to try doing that by buying gold and silver that you can actually hold. They'll mail it to you. And believe me, they'll mail it to you fast. And you can buy it with Bitcoin, which that's great. Roberts & Roberts, they are fully on board with supporting personal liberty, supporting Bitcoin. I mean, they came out. I did an interview with Tim Fry, the head of Roberts & Roberts, and he even said, he's like, look, I love Bitcoin. It's just the easiest way to do business. They want to do business with you. They think like you. This is a company that is one of us. So I want you to go to gold.zog.ninja, and you can go to Roberts & Roberts there and, just go nuts. Grab whatever gold, whatever silver you want. They have some of the best coins I've ever seen. A great selection, incredibly low prices. It's gold.zog.ninja, and don't hesitate to send Bitcoin. And if you want to, let them know, hey, the Golden Stallion sent me here to get golden. Gold.zog.ninja.
Welcome, Agent Sovryn. Please put on your headset to enter virtual reality.
I'm ready. Hit me.
Now entering Unimatrix 0.
I love this place. Secret community away from the...
Hey, Agent Sovryn.
Hello, who are you?
I'm Pixel. I like this place you've built in VR. Encrypted, secure, and very private. No one from the corporate system to see us or tell us what to do.
And if you're here, you must be friends with...
Oh yes, I've met the other girls, Brian. But I'm here now because we have another mission. We need to hack into the new system. They're about to...
Tell me on the way. Let's get out of Unimatrix 0. And don't worry, a quick hack solves everything.
Hack Sec.
It is time for Hack Sec, where we talk issues of hacking and security, and boy, did something shocking, at least to me. Well, no, it's not that shocking, not anymore. What is shocking anymore, right? Last week, and with little fanfare, that's what shocked me, was how little of a deal people made out of this. But it is kind of, if Apple saying screw you to the FBI, which was really just a marketing ploy, if that was a big deal worthy of sharing, I am baffled that Microsoft, more or less doing the same thing, suing the U.S. government, didn't get as much sharing. What? It really, kind of like we were talking about earlier in Sovryn Tech, I kind of feel like people just sort of root for companies, sort of like they root for, it's almost like this strange kind of Silicon Valley patriotism or digital patriotism for these various companies. And I find that to be very strange, and honestly, it's a little disturbing. Because, if we ever reached a stateless society, I think people would just end up being like, well, I'll wave, the big blue F flag, for Facebook, or I'll wave an Apple flag or something, or a Microsoft flag or whatever, because there's really no good reason. I mean, in some ways, I think that Microsoft suing the U.S. government is a little more legit. But before I get into why I think that's more legit, why don't I read a little bit of the story? And then I do want to look at this in the abstract, which also relates to the, Apple versus the FBI. But this is from Reuters by Sarah McBride. Microsoft has sued the U.S. government for the right to tell its customers when a federal agency is looking at their emails, the latest in a series of clashes over privacy between the technology industry and Washington. The lawsuit, filed on Thursday in a federal court in Seattle, of course, about a week ago, argues that the government is violating the U.S. Constitution by preventing Microsoft from notifying thousands of customers about government requests for their emails and their documents. The government's actions contravene the Fourth Amendment, which establishes the right for people and businesses to know if the government searches or seizes their property, the suit argues, and Microsoft's First Amendment right to free speech. The Department of Justice is reviewing the filing. Spokeswoman Emily Pierce said Microsoft's suit focuses on the storage of data on remote servers rather than locally on people's computers, which Microsoft says has provided a new opening for the government to access electronic data. Using the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, the government is increasingly directing investigations at the parties that store data in the so-called cloud, Microsoft says in the lawsuit. The 30-year-old law has long drawn scrutiny from technology companies and privacy advocates, including Casper Bowden, the late great Casper Bowden, that we've brought up many times. We've invoked his name and his research on Sovryn Tech, reading on, who say it was written before the rise of the commercial internet and is therefore outdated. Quote, people do not give up their rights when they move their private information from physical storage to the cloud, end quote, Microsoft says in the lawsuit. Let's stop right there. That's a way stronger stance than Apple ever fucking gave. Way stronger. Because Apple had no problem handing over the iCloud data from, in this big iPhone, the iPhone 5S case with the FBI. They just didn't want to unlock the device. It didn't have the data. They're like, oh, yeah, here, no, you can have the data. But here's Microsoft taking a far more principled stance, saying, no, you don't have a right to the data. Let's read on. It adds that the government, quote, has exploited the transition to cloud computing as a means of expanding its power to conduct secret investigations, end quote. So now this is what I mentioned. Casper Bowden, Stanley breaking in again. This is what he was talking about, is that there is a law on the books. This is what he discovered, and he worked for Microsoft actually, and became one of the best privacy advocates we've seen in recent years. And he worked for Microsoft and said he found out that there were laws that said if you run servers in the United States, if your company is based in the United States, you are subject to laws that compel you to hand over any data that you have, if it's on servers, as a company, as a corporation within the United States. And that's largely what I think a lot of this has to do. Too bad. And, really, I'm angry at Microsoft about this. Too bad they took this stance only after, unfortunately, Casper Bowden died, because it really vindicates his work, which he was called a conspiracy nut for. I'll read a little bit more of the story, and I have another story I want to break into with this, but here we go. The lawsuit represents the newest front in the battle between technology companies and the U.S. government over how much private businesses should assist government surveillance. By filing the suit, Microsoft is taking a more prominent role in that battle, dominated by Apple, which, again, like I said, I don't know why they're dominating it. In recent months, due to the government's efforts to get the company to write software to unlock an iPhone used by one of the shooters in the December massacre in San Bernardino, California, blah, blah, blah. So, all right, there's a little bit more to that story, but that's not, it's minor details. This is really, really interesting. Now, I'll admit that I think Microsoft is engaging. I'm not going to say to you that Microsoft is somehow caring about the consumer, just as I wouldn't make the claim that Apple gave two shits about any consumer, about any iPhone user. They just don't care. Believe me, they don't. I don't think Microsoft necessarily cares about the average person either. What I do think they care about, and this highlights, there's a couple points here. One of them is that we've talked about it on Sovryn Tech for the past 2 years. There has been a running case where the FBI and, other alphabet soup organizations have requested access to emails from Microsoft, out of their, Outlook system, out of servers based in Ireland. And Microsoft said, no, we're not going to hand over that data to you. Now, you don't realize the full picture. It's like, well, that's great. They're protecting people's privacy and all that stuff. Yeah, but you got to ask yourself the question first. Why are there, you got to go deep with this stuff. Why does Microsoft have servers in the land of potatoes anyway? Why are there servers in Ireland? Reason being, Ireland is a tax haven. Ireland is a haven for all kinds of things, including perhaps privacy and all that. They have it there. Microsoft has those servers there probably to, it's out of subterfuge. It's to hide things from the U.S. government. That's why, be it to hide, tax information, whatever they're trying to hide. They are hiding things there. So they are really protecting themselves. And of course, it's very nice that by default that ends up protecting the consumer of a lot of Microsoft stuff. But regardless, it's really not a consumer move. And I think, we talk about bad narratives. Yes, there is kind of an ugly narrative here. I think that, that Microsoft is playing off of here. I don't think they really care that much. I mean, they're more concerned about governments finding out what Microsoft themselves does more than they're worried about governments finding out what their users do. Okay? So let's keep that in mind. But there's a little more to it than that. And there's a very interesting story that I want to read here. And also, I wouldn't put it past Microsoft, for Satya, perhaps Satya Nadella, the present CEO, to want to get a little payback maybe for his old boss, Bill Gates, who was, famous, the very famous DOJ versus Microsoft case, the late 90s and early aughts, I've told that story before, that I think that was all about breaking a company that had the potential to become bigger than any government on the planet. And Microsoft was really on trajectory to do that back then. That was about breaking a man. And really, the government Microsoft is not a hero, but the government was certainly a villain. In that case, they brought Bill Gates to tears. It's just disgusting. But anyway, I want to read, there is a really interesting, and this comes from a lawyer. It's tough for me to read something from a lawyer. No, whatever. They're people. But this is interesting. And it's perfectly relevant to this whole idea of Apple not wanting to unlock iPhones or Microsoft not wanting to hand over every little email and every bit of piece of data that's on their servers. So I'm going to read it here. It's from Derek Khanna. And it's what the founders would say about the iPhone unlock case. And it's from March 23rd, 2016. Now, founders, of course, meaning the the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, all those guys. Or at least some of them, maybe not so much Hamilton. In a criminal investigation, if important information were behind a locked vault and the vault manufacturer had a master key to access the vault, the government would be on solid grounds to request this master key. But what if no master key existed? What if the vault was built and sold to preclude the existence of a master key? Now, this is important. This is much like, this is what the government's asking for in a lot of ways, from Microsoft and really from Apple as well, is they're looking for a golden key. Okay, or like a global decryption key of sorts, kind of like what BlackBerry handed over 6 years ago to the Canadian government and other governments. We talked about that last week on Sovryn Tech. Reading on, can the government conscript the manufacturer to develop a master key where none exists, to invent something novel, thereby compromising the security of all the owners of the vault? This is essentially the question a magistrate judge in California is grappling with in the wake of the San Bernardino shooting. The government seeks to access the iPhone of the deceased attacker through the use of a 227-year-old law, the All Writs Act. The government claims that this statute authorizes an order forcing Apple Inc. to create software that does not currently exist and that would effectively be a master key to access any iPhone. This is an order that no court has ever authorized in 227 years under this law. How? To justify this proposed order, the government claims that conscripting Apple to create a master key is the same as requesting a key already in existence. Such a conclusion is not just a stretch, it is illogical, particularly in light of the history of the All Writs Act. The government posits that government agents should always be guaranteed access to any type of information. But these claims are also wildly inconsistent with the history in which the statute was passed. And there is a long history in the United States of technology securing information even against government. To allow the government's interpretation of the All Writs Act would require completely disregarding the context in which it was passed. Now, folks, stallion breaking in. This is what's interesting here, because, of course, I'm an anarchist, okay? I don't give a shit about laws. And certainly I think governments are completely invalid. But if I were to exist within this paradigm, which a lot of these cases, Apple versus FBI, Microsoft versus, suing the U.S. government and all that, these are within legal frameworks. And so I want to show that even within these legal frameworks, the U.S. government is, engaging in bullshit tactics, in things that would never hold up, or that shouldn't hold up in any court of law. So I'm going to read on a bit more here. The All Writs Act was enacted as part of the Judiciary Act in the First Congress of the United States. It was enacted into law on September 24, 1789, the day before the Fourth Amendment was approved by Congress. That's interesting. Like many statutes in the founding era, the All Writs Act was passed in the context of the pre-existing legal system under Great Britain, where court orders were referred to as writs of assistance. Understanding these writs of assistance is important because, as the U.S. Supreme Court has held, the Fourth Amendment was quote, most immediately the product of contemporary revulsion against the regime of writs of assistance, end quote. Writs of assistance, more commonly called writs of aid, were a written order, a writ issued by a court. Using writs of assistance, the king would authorize wide-ranging searches of anyone, anywhere, and any time without being suspected of a crime. A writ, quote, a writ, as Hiller-Zobel explains, was a command to an officer in the name of the sovereign, end quote. Writs of assistance could be used to enlist the aid of any officer of the crown in conducting a search of a dwelling, shop, or warehouse for smuggled goods, end quote. In 1761, a young John Adams would sit in a Boston court as James Otis argued against writs of assistance authorizing arbitrary search and seizure practices. John Adams would take notes of the argument and write an extended abstract of the case. Otis was unequivocal in limiting the power of writs as he referred to limitless writs as, quote, the worst instrument of arbitrary power, end quote. John Adams would write, quote, then and there was the first scene of the first act of opposition to the arbitrary claims of Great Britain. Then and there, the child independence was born. In 15 years, namely in 1776, he grew up to manhood and declared himself free, end quote. So they're saying that stallion breaking, and what's the case being made here is that according to the founders, independence was completely based around the idea that this all writs business, or this writs business was disregarded, thrown away. This is trampling upon freedom at its very core, which shows that privacy has always been considered a core aspect of liberty. But let's read on. Otis's argument has often been cited by the Supreme Court as reflecting the framers' intent. Those quote-unquote hated writs directly motivated James Madison's crafting of the Fourth Amendment and were on the minds of the founders as they enacted the All Writs Act. To sustain the government's reading of the All Writs Act today, we must assume that the same week that Congress was passing the Fourth Amendment to limit the executive branch's power to obtain unlimited writs for search and seizure from the courts, Congress passed a simple two-line bill designed to grant courts nearly unfettered discretion to issue writs in violation of our liberty. Such a reading is even more contorted and indefensible in light of an originalist understanding of the Ninth Amendment, the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, and the privileges, blah, 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 tons of fucking laws, law. Now, there's a high point to this, so hold on. So reading on, while the Congress of 1789 didn't have digital devices, it did have long experience with physical locks. And this gets to stallion breaking, and this gets to Microsoft's point of that just because something becomes digital doesn't mean the law should change. Okay, so reading on, while today most locks are not viewed as a serious impediment to law enforcement because of the ease of accessing such locks through modern technology, in the 1780s there were physical locks that were not accessible to law enforcement. In 1785, Joseph Bramah developed the Bramah safety lock, which was unpickable. Bramah would establish a contest where he offered 200 guineas to the first artist who, quote unquote artist, who could make an instrument that picked the lock. Later, the Brahma lock was joined by the Chubb lock, another unpickable lock. This Brahma contest is very similar to Pwn to Own, right? Reading on. At one point, one state even offered a convicted burglar parole if he could break the Chubb lock. The All Writs Act was passed in 1789 at a time when the top locks were unpickable to anyone. Anything behind these locks was potentially off limits to law enforcement. The Brahma lock was eventually picked in 1851. Yet, over that 66-year history, no court appears to have ordered Chubb or Brahma to try to defeat their own security mechanism, despite the fact that, like Apple today, Chubb and Brahma were best positioned to find vulnerabilities in their own lock devices. In the Farouk case, the government argues that its requested extraordinary measure is needed in part because of the danger of the data self-destructing through more than 10 password attempts. But the Chubb and Brahma locks also had self-destruct features of a sort. James Otis argued that the writs of assistance were, quote, the most destructive of English liberty and the fundamental principles of law that ever was found in an English law book, end quote. Otis referred to the practice of writs that were universal, directed to all, as enabling a tyrant in a legal manner. Today, as the government is requesting that a company be conscripted against its will to create a master key, we should keep in mind the caution of James Otis, an important founding father. What is to stop the government from further intrusions upon our liberty? Bingo. There's a little bit more to the story, but I mean, that hits the high notes. But this is important. The Brahma and the Chubb lock. We have a history of unbreakable locks. We have a history of, some law enforcement's trying to break those locks. The one guy that was going to be given parole if he could break the damn thing. However, throughout that history of unbreakable locks, no court has ever said, okay, no, you know what? Just tell the company that they've got it secured, but they need to give it to you anyway and all of this. This whole idea, this intrusion on privacy and all that, has long been recognized. And I know Vince Cerf loves to say the privacy is an anomaly. Sorry, a 200-year history, if not more, that's not an anomaly. Okay? and obviously it goes far beyond that. But the need for privacy, the need for security, the fact that things get built that governments can't get into has never been illegal up until now. And that's probably up until now because only now, well, not only now, governments have always been tyrannical, but now we're dealing with some pretty hardcore fucking tyranny. All right. I mean, it's crazy. There's no legal precedent for any of this stuff. And saying that's, I'll give you another founding father's quote. Better a dangerous liberty than a safe tyranny? Where'd that go? Well, there could be terrorists out there. There could be killers out there. We got to have a golden key to Microsoft's emails, to Apple's iPhones, to all this stuff. Look, there's no guarantees that everything is going to be safe and hunky-dory. That's antithetical. I mean, you have to have a tyranny to really, honestly, to have like full-on safety that somehow encompasses large amounts of people. You've got to create a tyranny. And if you think tyranny's okay, well, then I guess you're okay with all that safety bullshit. Okay, but I don't. It's not okay for me. I'll take the danger. I'll take the risk. Because I'm a big boy. And I can handle it. There is absolutely no legal precedent for what the U.S. government, the NSA, the CIA, the who the fuck ever else, you pick your letters, pick your flag. There is no legal precedent for them to do that. And I don't even want to argue from the fucking legal point. I mean, the Bill of Rights, the first few amendments, I mean, those are supposed to be inalienable rights, right? Those are things you just have. They didn't need it. They didn't need to be codified. You just have them. But these governments think elsewise. Now, again, I don't think that these, that necessarily Silicon Valley is somehow defending our rights or anything along those lines. Quite the opposite. They are defending themselves. I already said how I think Microsoft is doing that, and said how I think Apple is doing that. But it's so much worse than I think anybody ever anticipated, because now, you don't even have to be told that you're being investigated, that your mail, I mean, it's email, but let's just, I like that delineation. Look, there's no reason that what's in the digital space needs to follow necessarily, falls under different laws than what's in the physical space. So your mail is getting sifted through and nobody has to tell you about that? Well, fortunately, history is on the side of those people that want their shit locked up and encrypted and private, as it should be. I'll be back with more. This is Sovereign Tech.
Time now for 90 Seconds on Sex with Dr. Paul.
It's simply not possible for a couple to become pregnant without a male partner's participation. Yet the instructions that most young men receive about birth control is limited to information about condoms, which are not one of the more highly effective methods of contraception. Now, while a lot of young men are interested or curious about birth control, they often feel as comfortable talking to a new partner about contraception and unwanted pregnancy as they are talking to her about tampons and period gear. One of the big problems with not teaching young males about birth control pills, IUDs, the patch, the implant, and the NuvaRing is we never give them the words to know how to have an intelligent conversation with a partner about different forms of birth control. So we're basically blindfolding them regarding a life-creating and life-changing event. We think it's important that high school students graduate with a knowledge of geometry and algebra that few will use in their lifetimes. Yet we place no value whatsoever on their graduating with the knowledge about effective kinds of birth control, which is something that will impact each and every one of them for the rest of their lives. If the only kind of birth control you know about is condoms, please visit different birth control websites and learn about the options that are more effective.
For more, visit 90secondsonsex.com.
I'm in. That was almost too easy.
Easy? More like you're very talented.
Thank you, Agent Sovryn. I hear you're very talented yourself.
Oh, Pixel. Flattery will get you everywhere with me. What do we have?
Blockchain transactions, smart contracts, the usual nonsense from Wait a minute, what's this?
That looks like
Important messages.
It is time for Important Messages, where I cover the questions that get sent in to me through the various channels available. Of course, you can go to contact.zog.ninja, and that'll take you right to the webpage where you can find my email. There's a form there. You don't even have to use email. You can just use the form and I'll get it. And you can do it anonymously too. I only mention people if they specifically say they want me to mention their name. All kinds of ways to get to get questions to me. And of course, it's also the way you can send stories, which we're going to be covering, in First Choice. That'll be interesting, which will actually kind of extend into somewhat of a listener question as well. Anyway, we have a little bit of a shortened segment, because there was so much to cover previous for listener questions. So we got some good little technical ones here that I think are interesting. Somebody sent an email. I talked about the Raspberry Pi 3. Now, I love the whole idea of, the Raspberry Pi ever since that whole initiative started. I love these little computers. They are so cool. Especially that they only cost, effectively $35. I mean, yeah, they cost a little bit more because you got to get, maybe if you want a case for it or if you want a power supply and all this stuff, yeah, you got to hash out a little bit for that. But effectively, the board itself is only $35. Yeah, you got to get a keyboard and mouse too, right, and a monitor. But they're cool. Now, the Raspberry Pi 3 came out, which I was really excited about, and I actually kind of liked the fact that it had Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built right into it. The original version of the Raspberry Pi, and actually the past three versions didn't have either. And there were three. There was like a Raspberry Pi B, right? B plus or whatever. And then the Raspberry Pi 2. Didn't have either of those built in. Now, the emailer said he or she is a little concerned over the fact that it has Wi-Fi built into it. And that effectively becomes another gateway, because it's already there. Pretty much saying, I think, that if you could just disconnect, like it was nice that you could disconnect, before you had to put into like one of the USB slots on a Raspberry Pi, you had to put in a little, USB, Wi-Fi card, essentially, or, Wi-Fi antenna. And that would give you Wi-Fi on it. The nice thing about that is that if you wanted a completely, offline device that didn't connect to the internet at all, you could just remove that Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi card or, USB Wi-Fi device. same with Bluetooth. And I get that. That's a pretty fair point. As far as I know, the Raspberry Pi 3 or the previous iterations of Raspberry Pi are still for sale. And, as long as the options exist, I think that's great. If you can buy the older models, I really do. I understand the idea of not wanting the Wi-Fi, and I agree. It's better if it's an option. I don't believe I don't have a Raspberry Pi 3. I do have one in my wish list at wishlist.zog.ninja, from Amazon. And boy, can I use it right now because my computer's just, it's all over. But anyway, yeah, it'd be great if, as far as I know, there isn't like a hardware switch on there. And this is the beauty of hardware switches, where you have a cutoff that just, turns off the Wi-Fi. The old ThinkPads used to have that. The new Librem laptops from Purism have these hardware switches. Hardware switches are so great. And I do wish it had that. So I agree that it could be problematic. Fortunately, you can still buy the older models of the Raspberry Pi. But going forward, there's probably going to be Wi-Fi in it. Overall, I mean, if I was playing a numbers game, I'd say it's better that it has Wi-Fi than not built into it. But at the same time, I totally concede the point, the emailer made, and I completely understand that perspective. So, it could certainly be seen as a problem. Absolutely. Let's see. Here's another one. Someone actually messaged me about Threema. Threema is messaging software. Of course, there's been a lot of talk. We talked about WhatsApp maybe last week, and Viber this week also actually has rolled their own encryption, much like Telegram does, and now they're encrypting their photos and texts. I don't know if it's their video calls that are encrypted or even their voice calls, but they are encrypting a lot of communications on Viber now. And that Viber has like 1 billion users. That's up to version 6.0 to where they started doing that. And one of the problems I have with WhatsApp and Viber, and this is also true for Threema, is it's not open source. Now, Threema is as far as closed source apps go, it is a lesser of evils because, as I understand it, it did have a third-party auditor come in. They didn't open source it, but they did have a third-party auditor come in and take a look at it, and the person said it was sound. Steve Gibson of Security Now fame, a personal hero of mine, he is a huge fan of Threema. They do authentication really well. And the main thing the person was bringing up is that Threema is designed to mitigate or, really lessen the amount of metadata that gets sent up from the app when using the app. And that's great. I think that's a wonderful thing. Just keep in mind, Threema is closed source. And everybody's personal threshold. This goes true for all this stuff. Just like Viber. Like, I don't trust Viber doing it because, A, the metadata is still up there, so it's not that big of a deal. But B, with Viber, it's closed source, and they rolled their own encryption. Like they came up with their own scheme, which is similarly, problematic with Telegram, and I have to admit that that's a problem. So it's all up to personal threshold. All of these things are one way that all of these different messaging apps are really great is that if it gets people away from Facebook, if it becomes an alternative to the Facebook ecosystem, which is why WhatsApp will never be a good thing because it's owned by Facebook. Like if Telegram or even like Line, like I have to use Line every day, just because, for clients and whatever else. I mean, it's a very, in the rest of the world, the apps that are popular in the rest of the world are very different from the United States. And Line does its own encryption too, but they encrypt everything they do as well. But the bottom line is that a lot of these have enough feature sets to really, and messaging's the future anyway. Everybody talks about that and whatever. Maybe I could talk about bots for a minute, but, a lot of these things have the ability to become replacements for Facebook. And I think that's a fine and dandy thing if they do. Threema, not bad. Anyway, so someone else asked about Magic Leap. I'll believe it when I see it. That's my straight up answer to that is that Magic Leap, it's this VR because I'm really big on VR technology. We haven't really seen anything. There was this big article by Kevin Kelly, who I like Kevin Kelly, of Wired. He did this write-up about, Magic Leap is the next big thing and all this stuff, when it didn't really tell us anything. We have no idea what the hell this is. And in technology, I tweeted about this in technology, seeing is believing. I mean, it's just needed. So when I see magically, I'll believe it exists. Right now, I'm doubting that it's a real thing. No matter how many cool videos they show off. I'll be back with more. This is Sovryn Tech. Hey, remember those two guys I talked to recently on the show about robotic stock trading? It was Ed and Pace from Cool Trade? Well, let me tell you, okay, you want to check this out. It's a robot. Cool Trade is a robot that watches the market, updates your stock prices every second of every day, never misses a beat. Since it trades it has stealth mode, it trades 100% of the time. It takes profits away from Wall Street, and they can't do anything about it. This is crazy. I mean, take that whole stock market. Nobody knows what your goals are. Again, you're getting a little bit of anonymity here. This is like cruise control for the stock market. You just sit back and relax and do whatever and do 10 or 20 times better than the average retirement plan. The programmer of Cool Trade, Ed Barsano, still sells 1-year licenses on his website for $3,500. But our anarchist friend and fan of Sovryn Tech, Pace Ellsworth, he's negotiated an awesome deal for Sovryn Tech listeners where you can save thousands and get your money growing on autopilot for just $5.97 per quarter. Just start up in simulation mode. Then when you trust the machine to take care of you and do you right, you decide how much real money you want to put into it. And with online traders like E-Trade or Scottrade, it's usually like $7 to $10 per trade. With Cool Trade, you can get an exclusive deal where it's only $1 per trade. It's $1, even if you start with 3,000 or 5,000. Hell, you can go to $1 million if you want to. It's worth it. Get started, or to just ask them more about it, go to smartmarketshow.com/Sovryn. That's the website. You want to use that /Sovryn, smartmarketshow.com/Sovryn, or call Pace directly. He's a very approachable guy, great guy. 480-636-0927. Okay, that's 480-636-0927. He'll set you up on the best strategy, for your dollar amount, and his team will give you the attention you need. They're awesome. Smart Market, the automation community. Throw all the mainstream financial planning advice out the window. Robots doing algorithmic trading is the future, and it's here now. Get started. You'll love it. smartmarketshow.com/Sovryn, Sovryn. And thanks so much for Cool Trade being a sponsor of Sovryn Tech. Let's get back to it. Did you get all of the data?
I got all of it. It's finished once we get this uploaded.
That's if we can get away from those blockchain drones in time.
Don't worry, I've got it covered. Over here.
I love a woman with a motorcycle.
Get on. A bike is always my first choice. First choice.
It is time for First Choice, where I cover the stories that get sent in to me through the various channels available. Of course, go to contact.zog.ninja to find that, or go to zog.ninja. You can find all of our great sponsors there, as well as all the ways to get in touch with me. Now, this story gets into really kind of a listener question as well as being a story. And I've hinted at this before in recent past episodes of Sovryn Tech. And this has to do, like I said, this is a science story. This has to do with the RK selection theory. Okay, or R versus K, perhaps that's a colloquialism for now, I guess, in a lot of circles. Now, like I said, I'm a self-avowed anarchist. This show reaches out to audiences well beyond anarchism, and certainly well beyond what other anarchist podcasts generally reach. But I have noticed in recent times that there have been multiple anarchist podcasts and podcasters, multiple, that have been subscribing to this idea of the RK selection theory. And what RK selection theory is, I mean, in ecology, it's kind of the idea that there's evolutionary traits, evolutionary selected traits, that are trade-off between quantity and quality of offspring. That's the idea, is that they develop certain evolutionary traits that are based upon either having a shit ton of children or on being very selective in doing so, not having so many, but being perhaps more in group or something like that. This is right out of the gate. In fact, there was a great podcast called Choice Conversations where they had a good friend of mine, Kevin McKiernan, on. And this is a guy that's knee deep in the scientific community. And he's like, look, not many people. It's like, yeah, there's certain aspects of R versus K that they pay attention to, but by and large, it's not taken very seriously. a lot of listeners to Sovryn Tech asked me to talk about it, and so I am going to talk about it here. There's a main book that a lot of this comes out of, and the book is called The Evolutionary Psychology Behind Politics: How Conservatism and Liberalism Evolved Within Humans. And it's by a guy called Anonymous Conservative. Actually, his name is Michael Turner. He's not that anonymous. He sucks at anonymity. Maybe he should listen to Sovryn Tech and learn a few things. But this book, I've read it. I've gone through it, and honestly, like, this is the case. This is where, and it's important, like, R versus K, okay, fine, let's say that's a scientific theory, okay, not like evolution is a theory. This is an actual, because evolution is a fact, this is an actual theory, as in it's not proven fact. But there are various, examples of animals that supposedly, of R selection and K selection within these various species. Ironically, the R versus K theory being used to explain politics, I mean, there's already a problem right there, because none of the animals that supposedly, and I say supposedly, we'll get into that supposedly, show these R selection and K selection strategies have politics. Like, I mean, they're not human. And that's sort of like the first thing with this R versus K. Like, the idea is that R selections are, I think the book breaks it down into like 5 different traits. Like, K selective strategies are, very, very competitive, very aggressive. They wait to have sex, which kind of blows my mind, because what in the animal kingdom? I mean, the animal kingdom operates largely on instinct. Like, they don't just wait. As to where the R selection is kind of the opposite, as to where they're more lazy, perhaps more pacifist or something like this. And they're mainly interested, like I said, they're interested in just turning resources into a reproductive strategy, like, right away. Like, as soon as they eat, they effectively want to have babies, and they're just, it's a quantity over quality, supposedly, as to where K is choosing, a K strategy is choosing for, the most fit animals, and the R is choosing for the most animals, not necessarily the most fit. Now, an important point to bring up is that, this is meant within species. Now, last time I checked, Homo sapiens are one species. Like, you can't have two, according to the scientific R versus K selection strategy, you can't have 2 different strategies within one species. That's not like how that science is supposed to work. But whatever. Okay. But now for the examples, I mean, because this is important to bring up. The examples that they give within nature, I mean, because if you want to prove something, you should have proof cases. They're problematic in and of themselves. Now, R, perhaps an easy way to remember this is that R is representative of, say, rabbits, who fuck like rabbits, and, there's just tons of rabbits everywhere. But at the same time, they are very weak animals because owls just pick them off willy-nilly. And this is all within the book, Evolutionary Psychology Behind Politics. And then, but the examples that they give for the K strategies for the strong animals and all this, are things like wolves. And there's a problem there. Because the idea is within K strategies is that there is it's very in group. Like, they don't go, wolves don't go sleeping around and all this, and they don't do so till later on. And there's like these very clear hierarchies and all this crap. Here's the problem, folks. With wolves, none of that's true. In fact, in the United States in particular, we have a coy wolf problem. Do you know what a coy wolf is? A coy wolf is a mixture between 2 different species, a coyote and a wolf. And they're running rampant because apparently nobody told the wolves that they're K strategists and that they need to stay in the group. Somebody forgot to give them the memo. Oh, but wait, they can't read. The leading examples within this whole idea that somehow, K, these K, genetic evolution, mutations, whatever words you want to use, okay, that somehow creates the conservative mindset, and that the R, creates the liberal mindset. I mean, this is, it really, especially when you go down the examples given. I mean, and I just gave a couple, but believe me, you can rip apart. So this is just like with penguins. People talk about how penguins are monogamous. The fuck they are. No, they're not. Talked about that many times on Sovryn Tech. Okay, I mean, we're applying evolutionary strategies that were built into, these animals, and we're pretty much ignoring, because that's the whole point of this book, and what a lot of these podcasters are claiming is that, this is why we're in the mess that we're in and all of this. Like, humans are animals, no doubt, but we are a little bit more than just animals. We're very enlightened animals. We have reason. It's eliminating the entire possibility that people have the human faculty of reason. Saying you don't have a choice. This is just what you do. Sorry, you're an R strategist. You're fucked for life. Are you kidding? What human being accepts their lot in life and isn't capable of taking it to the next level and improving their lot in life? Of course they are. Human beings are so dynamic. The concept of consciousness, which separates humans from the animal kingdom, in my opinion, because largely the animal kingdom works on instinct, just changes the game in so many ways. If you don't need proof of that, look at the various cities around you, all the technological developments that we talk about on Sovryn Tech and all that. I don't see wolves pulling that off. Big problems with this scientific theory and the way that it's being applied by people. And look, I'm not a biologist. I really shouldn't talk either. Okay. But I know when somebody tells me that the sky's purple, they're full of shit. And I can at least call that. And I can say, no, I know. I've seen the proof. I've seen a coy wolf. These theories it's bullshit. Now, in fact, I'm going to do you one more. I'm going to take you I'm not saying I believe any of these, like I said, when you get into the dynamics of the human condition due to consciousness, you change every game out there, in my opinion. Okay? But let's just say that the golden stallion believed in perhaps evolutionary, certain aspects of evolutionary psychology, behaviorism, and all that. I'm going to toss this one on you. This is from Elite Daily. The wanderlust gene, why some people are born to travel. There are some people who never feel the urge to leave the house. They're content to stay in the city they came from, the couch they sit on, and the 360 degrees that immediately surround them. Then there's the rest of us, the people who can't sit still, perhaps meditate to Anthony Bourdain, and always keep their passports on them just in case. Whether you call it wanderlust or love of travel or regular old curiosity, the fact remains the same. Your hunger to explore simply cannot be quenched, no matter how many vacations or journeys you take. For you, there's always something new to see, something different than you're used to. You enjoy day trips, but you realize there's only so much you can see in 24 hours. According to recent scientific claims, it may have been embedded in your DNA even before that. As told on one psychology blog, the inherent urge to travel can be traced back to one gene, which is a genetic derivative of the DRD4 gene, which is associated with the dopamine levels in the brain. The gene itself, which is identified as DRD4-7R, has been dubbed the wanderlust gene because of its correlation with increased levels of curiosity and restlessness for the most part. In reality, however, those who carry this genetic information typically share one common theme, a history of traveling. Now, I want to get the traveling aside. There's more I want to read on in here, but there's a lot more to it than just travel when you research the DRD4-7R gene. It's also called not just the wanderlust gene, but the explorer gene. Some people even call it the risk gene. Okay, I'll read a little more. Assuming that all forms of human life originated in Africa, someone who conducted a study in 1999, Chansberg Chen, supported that the premise that the DRD4-7R form of the gene is more likely to occur in modern-day societies where people migrated longer differences from where we first originated, distances, I imagine he meant, from where we first originated in Africa many thousands of years ago, end quote. In short here, Chen implies that civilizations have diverged further from Africa, the theoretical origin of mankind, are allegedly more susceptible to being carriers of this mutant DRD4-7R gene that is linked to curiosity and restless. A separate study done by David Dobbs of National Geographic supported these findings and provided reason not just to draw the link to curiosity and recklessness, but specifically a passion for travel. Whatever. They're concentrating on the travel, but there's more. According to Dobbs, the mutant form of the DRD4 gene, 7R, results in people who are, quote, this is important, more likely to take risks, explore new places, ideas, food, relationships, or sexual opportunities, end quote. He went on to say that bearers of this gene, quote, generally embrace movement, change, and adventure, end quote. Now, here's the irony. Let's take 7R, DRD4-7R. Let's take 7R and let's apply that to perhaps the traits laid out for the R strategist within the R versus K theory. I think that perhaps a lot of those fit into, other than like the laziness, which is obviously not there, that fits into the 7R. The sexual promiscuity was part of the R selection. Okay, they're fucking everywhere. Oh my God, can't stop these rabbits. They're just fucking. I want you to ask yourself this question. Let's take the great innovators of all time, the great philosophers, the great ideologues. And while the R versus K theory is applied to humans by some, most people don't really argue about the fact that, yes, there absolutely is a gene called DRD4-7R. And how do you think, what people do you think actually moved humanity forward? How did we end up with civilization? How did we ever leave Africa? How did we ever come up with new ideas? How did we ever invent all the technologies that we invented? It's probably, and I'm not saying I buy into this, but if I were to go with these genetic ideas, it would be the people that have the 7R gene, the people that associate with the R strategy, not the K strategies. So in fact, based upon these narratives, the K strategists, we'd still be living in the jungle if we were K strategists. We never would have evolved to what we are now if people didn't explore, if they didn't come up with new ideas, if they didn't perhaps enjoy life to the fullest by having sex. Because, folks, sex is not just a reproductive strategy. That's another huge problem with the whole R versus K thing, is that it somehow assumes as fact that sex is merely a reproductive strategy. It's not. It's also a social lubricant. This whole, it's crap. There's the chance that somehow it fits. And and I'll admit, the book that I mentioned, Evolutionary Psychology of Politics, it admits that, there can be mixtures of like R and K. It doesn't have to be 100% either way. But I don't see, amazingly that book admits it, but these podcasters aren't admitting to that. They're saying, no, it's black and white, man. You're either liberal or you're conservative. And they're more or less saying, this is the ultimate us versus them. Honestly, I think a lot of these people are effectively saying, they're supporting because they're saying, no, all these R strategists, they've got to go. Are you kidding? You're telling me you are incapable of reaching out to hearts and minds? I thought that was the whole reason half people that are anarchist podcasters podcasted. And again, if I'm going to play your science game, if I'm going to play your evolutionary psychology game, well, I'm going to one up you with something that is far more provable and has had a ton more research done from independent parties, not people just all reading the same book by okay, which is DRD4-7R, which says that the people that push humanity forward, the people that have actually created civilization as we understand it, the people that have invented all these things are most likely sexually promiscuous. They are liberals of the highest degree, and I would love to count myself in their number if I bought into those ideas. But I don't. I think breaking down humans to simply the sum of their parts, whether those theories are even real or, are even applicable to humans. And we've already talked about why they couldn't be, because humans are one species and RK is specifically meant for species. It's not a battle within one. Is a disservice to humanity. It's a disservice to what we've accomplished. It's a disservice to what we can accomplish. It's a disservice to what we can become. It is an insult to the human condition. So, what are my thoughts on the RK theory? Nice theory. To quote Carl Sagan, it'd be a shame if someone were to test it. Well, it's been tested. And the evidence brought to me is found very wanting. I read the whole book. Okay, and I don't see the cases made. I can disprove. I don't even need a Google search. I can look out my back window and know that it's not true. And even, this gets into so many things. Like people talk about, wolves, there's the alpha wolf and the omega wolf and all that stuff. People don't realize how much humans anthropomorphize animals. You're somehow saying that, well, we have leaders, so we're going to assume that these animals have leaders, or that these animals somehow have like monogamous or marriage strategies and all this stuff. You're anthropomorphizing human constructs onto animals that they don't do that. They have no understanding of that. And I would argue that whole alpha omega thing just doesn't even hold up under some really rigorous science. This is bullshit.
The reviews are in, and Babylon 5's a winner. The New York Daily News says Babylon 5 could make Star Wars look like a walk in the park. The Chicago Sun-Times calls it a welcome addition to the sci-fi universe. Impressive, perfectly scaled for TV, raves the LA Times. And the Kansas City Star says Babylon 5 is one space station you're likely to want to visit frequently. See for yourself what everyone's talking about on Babylon 5.
Babylon 5 is available for download on your favorite torrent site. See it now to experience the greatest show in television history. Babylon 5.
Pixel and Agent Sovryn. Welcome to Unimatrix Zero.
Thanks, computer. So, Brian, looks like we have the whole place to ourselves.
We do, actually. Did you have something in mind to do?
Well, this is virtual reality. I thought maybe we could...
Pixel, you look... I love VR.
Come here, Brian. Oh, fuck yes.
The climax.
Oh, the world is full of false paradigms, isn't it? I tell you. Well, to talk about someone briefly, we only have a few minutes in the climax here, that clearly did very well for themselves, but was obviously incredibly sexually promiscuous. I guess he must have been an R strategist and couldn't make much of himself, except for, holy shit, he somehow inspired Niagara Falls to be turned purple the other day. He inspired Google to change everything purple and have purple rain. Of course, I'm talking about Prince. One of the greatest musical geniuses, I think, to ever walk the earth. And I think I can say that with fact. This is a man. I'm a fan. I reviewed his second to last album, Artificial Age, from 2014. I reviewed that on Sovryn Tech as a beautiful album, speaks very much to our day, with the idea that we don't need no clouds, no. And he's not talking about clouds and sky. He's talking about cloud servers. The guy definitely, knew what he was talking about. Okay, well, unfortunately, yes, he did, he was a crazy fan of copyright for some reason. That's unfortunate. And some people would say, well, he made that quote, how he's so over the internet. But look, folks, I'm over the internet. Okay. I'm over the web. Like, not the internet in the abstract as in the infrastructure, but I am certainly over like how the World Wide Web works. And maybe he was ahead of his time. But anyway, I'm a huge fan of Prince. Always have been. I had a lot of people, message me and say, hey, you feeling all right, knowing the Prince is gone and all that stuff. And that's nice. I mean, the same thing happened when Michael Jackson died. In fact, I remember my sister calling me when Michael Jackson died saying, Brian, are you okay? Because I really internalize these guys. Like, I mean, their music is so, like, if it doesn't reach into your soul, I mean, well, then what do you care who you're listening to? And soul, of course, that's speaking in an abstract. I don't believe in a soul. But I mean, he was just one of the greatest. Like I said, he could play 21 instruments. He's had his first album came out in 1978, and he made an album up until, what did he have come out in 2015? He had the two-parter, the Hit and Run phase 1 and phase 2. They did it with Third Eye Girl. Just fantastic albums all the way up. I mean, in 2004, when he finally came back as Prince, of course, there was that famous time when he was the artist, formerly known as Prince, because he was getting out of the slavery of the recording industry, which is amazing, too, because he ended up being absolutely right. I mean, and when the recording industry loses power, look at how many people can make such amazing music. You think of Lindsey Sterling and all these independent artists that have just come up with incredible stuff. They're really empowered because they're not with the recording industry. Yeah, I mean, and there's arguments, on the flip side of that, too, that I understand. But anyway, when he came back with Musicology, great album. I mean, and probably if anybody remembers his performance, I think it was for Get Off at the MTV Video Awards in 1991. I mean, that was like the sexiest shit I ever saw on TV. Like, that was amazing. This guy, you know, I mean, he did that. I saw some people tweet, you know, the idea that Prince was this mixture of weird and sexy, and he made it work, you know, and it was really something. And I agree. I think he paved the way for all kinds of, you know, really, really great self-expression that other people wouldn't have thought about. So it's, you know, it's a shame. And I kind of hope, like, his last album, Artificial Age, was all about this guy getting cryonically frozen and then being healed and woken up like 100 years later or whatever. I sort of wish that happens. I don't know. We're not clear on on how Prince died, at this time. Apparently there's reports that he was getting treated for a drug overdose a few days before. He did have a big party the night before, as I understand it. But again, all the details on that are very scant. But if you've never listened to Prince, if you're not a fan, I mean, there's so much great music, not just Purple Rain. Everybody was kind of sharing Purple Rain, and even I quoted it in a tweet. But I mean, he did the soundtrack for Batman was amazing. I mean, there's the Diamonds and Pearls was a great album. And there's a lot of albums that nobody really paid attention to. I already mentioned his later ones, Musicology and all that. But there was the Black Album, which originally got written in 1987, but didn't get released. I don't know that it ever got officially released, but it came out in 1994. But the record companies didn't want it to come out because, like, and the whole thing was he wanted to get funky again because he was getting criticism for being too poppy. And so he wanted to show that he still had all the funk in the world. And boy, if you listen to Musicology, you certainly get that, for proof. But, the Black Album is amazing to listen to. The record companies were kind of stuffing that down. So again, he was right. I mean, he was a slave to the record companies. They weren't letting him express himself. Another great one was in 96. He had Chaos and Disorder. This is a full-on rock album. I mean, this guy could play the guitar. Like, if he wanted, he could play any music he wanted, Prince. If he wanted to, he could have been the next Jimi Hendrix, hands down. I mean, he had plenty of guitar in his music anyway, but if you listen to Chaos and Disorder, you know, that really brings it, to the fore. And, just a guy that knew, you know, one of the quotes I love by him is so good. Peace is more than the absence of war. I mean, right on. This guy was definitely all about love, you know. Prince was the real deal. In fact, I remember one of my first cars that I ever owned. It was a 98 ACR Dodge Neon, ACR meaning American Club Racing. And I put subs, you know, I had the Rockford Fosgate amplifier in it, and I put two 10-inch JBL subs in the back. I mean, I went all out, you know, and the first music I played, in fact, the car was purple. It wasn't black. But when I saw it on the lot and it came in the ACR edition and it had this like really deep purple to it, I was like, oh, that's perfect. Now, I'm a Deep Purple fan too, but I named the car Purple Rain, and I even got a graphic done along the top that said Purple Rain. They used to be a popular thing to do graphics, on the front windshield. And I had it say Purple Rain across the front in that font, you know. And I came out playing, you know, Let's Go Crazy. And it was so funny because I was leaving the mall. This would be, 98, 99. And this woman, very attractive woman actually, yelled, like, we're at a stoplight, and she yells from like the passenger seat, rolls down her window, and she's like, turn that shit up. You know, here I am playing Prince, Let's Go Crazy, as loud as hell. And she just got totally into it. And I didn't want to be creepy and follow her, but I was like, wow, what taste, you know, for somebody to have at a stoplight. But you know, it was just very influential. I mean, really, his music, definitely made sexy. It put it out in the open, especially in the pop realm. At the time, it wasn't like necessarily out in the open, especially in the 80s. But he made it out in the open. Metal was making it out in the open, but pop wasn't. Pop had to it was all an innuendo. You had to hide it, like with Sledgehammer or Inside Sylvia, or things like that. But he just brought it right out there. It was fantastic. I always wish that there was plans for him and Michael Jackson. They were supposed to the song Bad by Michael Jackson was supposed to be a duet with Prince. Boy, that would have been amazing. But just an extreme talent, clearly an R strategist, just a liberal asshole, and I'm sure somebody's glad that he's dead, and shame on you for that. But I'm being somewhat facetious. What a loss. In 2016, I mean, Lemmy, David Bowie, it's tough because, you know, I'm really able to live in like today, I can live in a bubble where I just listen to new music, not old music, where I listen to new music from all the artists I've been listening to since I was like 6. There's a new Roxette album coming out. Can you believe that? There's a new Def Leppard album. So many different bands that I've been listening to for decades that I can just pretend, nobody else comes out here. There's no other new styles of music. I can just listen to these guys for eternity. But the more time passes, the more things I find that I have to leave behind. And a lot of these guys are people I wish that didn't have to be left behind. I've said many times that I know there's the saying that death and taxes are the only things that are certain. I don't think that has to be. I certainly don't believe taxes have to be certain. And I certainly don't believe that death has to be a certain thing. We can develop technologies beyond that. So many things we can do. So it's a shame about Prince. I also want to mention China. I mean, what a loss there. I mean, and she died at a significantly younger age than Prince did. And she was, this is a woman, Triple H brought her in. My past with wrestling is not new news to anybody that listens to Sovryn Tech. D-Generation X, which she was one of the members, kind of a founding member, certainly one of the most memorable members of it. She was a big part of that. And it was great. It was so cool because, she brought on what I love, a really strong woman. I know case strategists hate that because then women don't need men, and I think that's a great thing that women don't. But I love the fact she was such a strong woman, and she really, just an amazing talent in wrestling. And supposedly she may have fallen to, perhaps some of her quote unquote personal demons. And that's really sad too, because she was so talented. Both people really blurring the lines between what's sexy, between sexuality and all of this. And it's a shame for either of them to go, even though China hasn't been in wrestling for a very long time. But yeah, both very influential people to me. I'm really sad to see them go. Anyway, that's enough for this week. If you enjoyed the show, please do not hesitate to donate. Go to donate.zog.ninja to do that. Carpe Lucem, everybody. I'll see you on the other side, and let's hope the rest of 2016 is okay.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovryntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show, and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please, share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.